I'm Mel Stewart, and this is the SwimSwam Podcast. Joining me today, we have the current athletic director of Caltech, an Olympic champion, and we have the author of More Than Medals, Lessons from Olympians. Today, we have Betsy Mitchell. How you doing?
I'm great, Mel. Thanks for having me so much. How are you?
This episode of the SwimSwam Podcast is sponsored by Commit Swimming, SwimSwam's exclusive team management software partner. Since 2015, Commit has been providing coaches with swimming's leading workout management software. And now, Commit has team management software too. Commit wants to help you make the switch from Team Unify to a simpler, more powerful solution. Their onboarding and customer service team will walk you through every step of the way. Check them out at commitswimming.com to book your demo today. That's COMMIT swimming.com.
I'm not normally as excited to talk to someone as I have been to talk to you, and I have to provide a little, context here. So when I was a young athlete, developing and living the dream and dreaming for something more, the person that I thought of that could give me some insight into that world was Betsy Mitchell.
Oh, so kind of you.
Which a lot of people have that experience and they have that person, and it doesn't always go well for them. They eventually, they meet them and get to know them, and it's not a good relationship.
or vastly disappointing,
Or vastly disappointing. You were always gracious and kind and patient, which is that's, looking back on it, it's something that I really cherish and value, and I love you. I just wanted you to know that.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I think, well, were you doing this in my house, you would have come through the front door and you would see the mat on my front door, which says, in a world where you can be anything, just be kind. And it literally is the mat at the right that my dog and I go over every morning. And so I don't know where I picked that up. I'm sure from my parents and probably from some of my coaches and teachers, but I'm glad it has at least affected one life. So great.
I'm thankful that we have this opportunity, because you've reached this point in your life and in your career with so much experience, and it's so varied. And it's so unique. It's far more unique than I don't know of anyone in swimming who's had this experience. There might be an example, but we'll let our listeners know. They can tell us. But it's you've had this moment where you're like, I'm going to put this down. I'm going to share what I've learned. And More Than Medals, Lessons from an Olympian is this is a quick read. This is concise, and just to give people, our listeners, a quick preview. Just chapters. I'm just going to brush over them, focus on fun, losing as a part of the process, work toward goals. If you mess up, don't give up, get involved, get back. Life is more than medals. And that's not all the chapters. That's just a quick brush over them. And this is tight. I mean, so you're probably coming in at about, based on my feeling of it's about 50,000 words.
Yeah.
This can, you can sit down and do this in an afternoon, grab yourself a tea, a coffee, curl up in the corner and dive in, and you're going to want to. You're going to want to. What was the impetus? What was the desire to get you started and to publish?
I have always had little snippets of things that I knew I was learning real time, and I've sort of written them down. And I don't know that I'm an extensive journaler. I did keep journals throughout my swimming career, but I've always sort of written and thought, oh, but it's been like on a beach, in a plane, on a, just at home on a rainy day. And I needed my co-author, Ann Worthington, who was my college roommate, Longhorn, to help actually draw it out. I am much better in talking and engaging in a talk with an audience one-on-one, and these things come out. And I've just always known I wanted to do it, and I never knew how. And so I've been nudging Ann and asking and begging and cajoling. And finally last summer, she said, okay, let's do it. And so she helped give me some structure, which was we talked every Tuesday, kind of like Tuesdays with Maury, but better. And she drew it out of me. We put it down, we organized it, and CG Sports Publishing did it for us. So the impetus for now, Mel, is I see so much going wrong with youth sports. I am troubled about the future of college sports. I am disillusioned by the Olympic movement. And yet all of the things that you and I got from sport are the same thing that every single person who undertakes it can get. Doesn't, we have the medals, okay, great. But the power of the experience, millions and millions and millions of people and kids can have and should get. And I'm just really worried that's in jeopardy in our culture right now. So that's why now. That's why now.
And we're on the eve of the U.S. Olympic trials coming up in Indianapolis on June 15th and the Olympic Games in Paris. I think your timing is good for you. I wasn't sure if that was the timing thing, but it's like releasing a Hollywood tentpole movie. You're like, Betsy, I've got the book.
Well, it doesn't hurt. I wasn't sure we'd make it. And so I think Ann felt fairly driven to make sure we made it. But nonetheless, Mel, if it helps the conversation, that's what I want to do. You didn't ask this question, but I purposefully did not trade on my name in my moment. I wanted to go on with life. I wanted to move on. I had a job waiting for me. I knew, because I came of age at the time when there really wasn't. I turned down some things, but if there wasn't, they were going to pay me $500 to wear a swimsuit. It would have cost my dad more in legal fees to make sure the contract was all right than to do that. So I wanted to have a differently purposeful life, and I have, but that has given me the perspective to know we're getting some parts of this wrong. And anyway, I'm now more at ease saying, yeah, I am that, and I'm so much more. And before I thought, well, if I say, yeah, I'm that, people were going to think that's all I was, and I never wanted that.
I would like to stick a pin in this topic of where we're getting it wrong. I want to come back to that. It's very important.
Sure.
And it's that motivation or the thesis for writing any book. It's like I'm going to get into the meat of it and just dig in a little bit more. But let's just talk about you and your experience. Age grouper early on, Ohio, early performer. That I don't know too much about your age group years, except you're getting Y national cuts really early on, and then you appeared at Mercersburg Academy. Is there a moment in your age group swimming where everything clicked and you're like, oh, this is my jam. This is my identity. This is where I'm just going to live.
Well, I would say to your audience, read the book, and what you'll realize is no, right? Is no. So I don't know that I thought I was a good swimmer until my junior year in high school, after I had been at Mercersburg for a year. I was good locally, and I think I was pretty good regionally, but I didn't know it contemporaneously. I really didn't, right? Because that's why chapter 1 is focused on fun. This is what I did. This was the only thing there was for me to do. It's what my friends did. And, I had great sport parenting. I just had the best sport parenting. And so I legitimately was a sophomore in high school before I even had an inkling that there was a world out there. And, that was 1980. So I got to Mercersburg Academy because the school system in my very small rural Appalachian town was going to fail. And my mom knew that because she was the president of the school board. And she was like, and it truly was equal parts, getting a little better at swimming. And I'm sure they knew differently than I knew, but but there wasn't going to be a junior year of high school for me. And I was one of the few people from Marietta who was going to actually go on to college. And so we started looking at a few prep schools, and we flew down to Florida, and Florida wasn't my jam, and Mercersburg was close to home. And so that's how I got there. So, no, there wasn't an aha moment. There was it's always a balanced life, school, swimming, larger experiences. My parents were, they let me go. A lot of, this, a lot of times when you say you've been to, boarding school kid, people assume, either you're a total screw up or, something's really wrong with your family. And sometimes it is. But I was fortunate. I was allowed to go. My parents sacrificed to let me go. And I think that's why it's just such a special time for me, that moment when I went to Mercersburg.
Well, it's a connection that we share. I went to Mercersburg, and you were a legend among.
You're good for my ego.
You were a legend among our class. But in terms of people understanding who you are, if they don't already, it's you went to Mercersburg. I forgot that you were at UNC for a blip.
A blip.
But yeah, but you went to the 1984 Olympic Games, Los Angeles, became an Olympic champion, silver medalist in the 100 backstroke, then went on to Texas, and 9 individual titles, Honda Award winner, 4 NCAA team titles. That's pretty extraordinary college experience. That's and in the middle of it, you break a world record in the 200 backstroke at World Championships, the 208. That 2, I remember reading that 208 and looking at that 208 and wondering, could I go 208?
What was your best 200-meter fly time?
155.
Okay, you're a lot faster than I am. You're a lot faster than I am. But
No, I'll put it up. So our coach, we shared a coach, and he had me some backstroke in high school, and I was a prep school champion in backstroke,
I don't
and
think I
100
knew
backstroke.
that.
And so backstroke was always something that you were sort of playing with. So I appreciated backstroke. And to me, it was harder than butterfly, because in fly, fly was rhythm and rest, and backstroke was just pain. If you did it right, you drove with your legs the entire time, and there was no way out of this prison. If you wanted to be great, you had to suffer. Was that your backstroke experience?
100%. That's 100% it. And the funny thing is, I think I actually started backstroke trying to get away from butterfly and freestyle, which I swam almost exclusively as a child. And I thought, oh, it's too boring, looking at that line, and I don't get to breathe whenever I want. And I flipped over like, oh, I can breathe whenever I want. Well, that's also not the reality of it, but I talked myself into it. Yeah.
But let's put the two. So 1986, 208 was a 208.61. Let me look at the time.
208.61. Yeah.
No, it was a 208.60.
Oh, all right.
You got it every 100.
Every little
matters.
last 100.
208.60. That was fast. 1986. I mean, if we put you in a tech suit, you'd be like a 159 now.
Forget about the tech suit, Mel. Look, I swam. Let's see. I figured it out one day. In a meter pool, if you go a meter for every turn, I swam 203 meters. Think about it that way. Forget about the suits. I mean, suits are what they are, but no, look,
wait.
It was fast. It was fast.
I have to interrupt you here, because a lot of we do have coaches. We have coaches that are so young they might not realize it. You're touching the wall.
I was touching the wall. You had to touch the wall and then turn around. You really couldn't get onto your stomach, or not even really on your side, certainly not past vertical. You had to touch the wall on your back and then turn around and go. Yeah, it was longer. It was a longer pool. Actually, the pool was the distance. They're swimming shorter now.
And there's no dolphin kick. You were flutter kicking off the wall.
I was flutter kicking off the wall. The dolphin kick came into being while I was swimming in college, and I never really dolphin kicked. I only flutter kicked. Seemed to work for me. Worked out okay.
And you went on to 88, picked up another Olympic medal, swam until 1990. And you were, we were all in the same pool with David Burkoff, and you still didn't flutter kick. What's going on, Betsy? You weren't innovating.
No, because sometimes, because sometimes, um, no, look, people thought I was innovative with my turn because of how I pushed the boundary onto almost vertical. I wasn't, there was nothing innovative about me, right? But somehow my turns became known and then emulated, and then they made rule turns, right? Well, they make rule changes so that officials can officiate cleaner. They don't make rule changes necessarily for the athletes. They make rule changes for the officials. Yeah, no, I'm not an innovator. I'm not an innovator.
Well, we have to pull out the big guns. So went on, coached at Dartmouth.
Yep.
While you're coaching at Dartmouth, so you're going right into your career as a coach. You're like, I'm going to stay fit, and you start rowing, and
Um,
then you make the national team and go on to
also,
represent Team USA at World Championships in 1994. When I found that out, I was so proud. I was like, wow, this is amazing. This is the coolest thing. No one's doing this.
well, think about it. There are sports, right? There are sports that do it, right? Those track, right? Bobsled goes and gets those track studs, right? And I'm sure there's other things. Team handball is made exclusively of, volleyball players and basketball players, and I don't know what else. But look, I was living in Hanover, New Hampshire, and I was still really fit. I mean, Mel, really, I might just even now at 58 be tapered. I mean, let's be honest, right? Like I should jump in. Dara, ask Dara about this. I should just jump in and see what happens. No, but I was living in the Upper Valley, and the crew coaches were like, "You're gonna love this, right? It's all leg drive, it's all lungs, it's knowing how to balance in water. You got this." And God, they were right. I loved it. I mean, I loved swimming. I loved my swimming career, but every ensuing sport that I have learned, from rowing to golf, and yes, now pickleball, um, I loved it. I absolutely loved it. And it was a fascinating story if you have time for it. I also began doing winter training with the Dartmouth varsity team. So, get my workout out of the way. We'd have morning workout with my swim team, and then the rowers would just be struggling into the erg room, and I'd go in there and I'd train on the erg with them in the deep dark Hanover winter. And I was pulling these monster ergs. No surprise, really, right? I'm 25. I'm at the peak of my fitness. And the national team coach calls me, right? And says, he's this East German guy, I don't forget his name. "You must move to Atlanta." I'm like, "What? I have a job. I'm happy. I don't, you must move, you throw the biggest erg, you must move it." I'm like, "No, I've already done that. I did that. I'm just gonna row my boat, find a little doubles partner. I'm gonna do this as a side gig." But again, focus on fun. Right? What did I want to do? It was a hoot. I loved it. I loved
I
rowing.
I remember asking you about this, like, why didn't you go further? And your response was that you're like, I've done this. I read that chapter. I'm on to my next chapter. And your next chapter is interesting. And I didn't know this about your mother and her position. That was at her career in education.
She was a guidance counselor. She was a biology teacher, and then in her service section, she was yeah, a school board member.
And when did you go from being a coach to being an athletic director? What was that transition?
Yeah, I I knew I wanted to be an athletic director because I met Donna Lopiano at Texas, and she was a force of nature, um, um, and she was our athletic director. And I just thought, if I could help organize and help provide opportunity that I personally had benefited from, if I could do that for other kids, I would want to do that. And so I sort of had in the back of my mind all the time that I wanted to do that. But I also knew that I needed to understand coaching, because the major currency for an athletic director is their coaches, right? That's the most important thing they do. So I went from Dartmouth, and I went back to school at Harvard for a year at the School of Education. And then I pivoted to being an athletic director. And I went to a high school called Laurel School for Girls to do that work. And Donna was so mad at me, and she's like, "If you go to the high school level, you're never going to get back to the college level. What are you doing? You're never going to get stuck." And I'm like, "Well, if I get stuck, then that's where I'm supposed to be, and I don't think I'm going to get stuck, but this is what I want to do." And, in comes the trusting your gut part. So, yeah, I always knew I wanted to do it. And really, Mel, it comes from expanding spheres of influence, right? There's me as a swimmer and as a student, and then there's I'm part of a team, and you begin to understand what it is to collaborate and rely on people and be vulnerable and lead people. And then it was lead a team, right? And then it was lead a department, and then lead at one level and lead at another level. So that's kind of what it's been. It's been always like, okay, I got that. I bit off something I can chew. What's the next little layer? What can I go expand and try to do more or better or different?
We're now decades in. You're the athletic director at Caltech.
Man.
Everyone in the world knows Caltech. And it's when I found out that you'd gotten the position, I was at that moment that I had the same type of moment when I knew that you were on the national team rowing. I was just like, yeah, Betsy, that makes
Mm.
sense. She did it. She did it again. But it has been this career in service, and it's really education. This is education. This is
It's
all
education.
about it's all about rewiring brains and preparing people for life. And if anybody's qualified to tell us, hey, there are a few things that are wrong. This is going in a direction I don't like. I don't want you to give away everything, but I do want to understand, that when you see that something's wrong, it does motivate you to move. Uh, Explain that to me. Give us a little bit of insight into it.
Well, this is going to go. Thank you for the compliment. It's a huge compliment, and it's something that I take very seriously. I think the only thing it can go back to, Mel, is I was 6 in 1972, and I was in a small town where I went to sign up for T-ball with my brother because I hung out with, to his chagrin, right? My brother and his buddies were my buddies, and I wasn't allowed to sign up for T-ball. That's how I became a swimmer. I wasn't allowed to. And I mean, I was only 6. What do I know? But I know that has stuck with me in terms of helping, opportunity, opening doors, leaning into whatever the person wants to do to help them do it. These are all sort of foundational concepts for me. So um, that's what I know. That's what I know to say, right? And things are wrong. I'll use a swimming example. So I was on the NCAA swimming rules committee when tech suits came out. Interesting. And it was, I don't know, I don't know, you'd know better than I would, but not too long after I set a world record, and then my world record was broken, right? I held the world record for 5 years and American record for 19 years. So I was particularly positioned at that time, and John Urbanchek was on that small subset of the rules committee with me. And we were sitting there talking about it. And I said, we just have to figure out what the major difference is, right? Because these tech suits take the one thing that you can't really teach, and that's body position. You can teach all kinds of other things about swimming. You can teach all kinds of things, but you have to feel it and or develop the strength to do it. It's the one thing you can't teach. And that's the one thing that these suits, of course, do or did. And I don't want to make myself into a dinosaur here because I don't know crap about it. I really don't. But Urbanchek and I sat around saying, well, what's the difference? I said, we were there at the University of Michigan. Get some lab on it. Figure out what the difference is. And of course, the suit companies know what the difference is. Anyway, when we settled on it was textile versus plastic, then it was pretty easy to figure out what the right middle ground was, right? Of course, the sport's going to continue to innovate, and it should, and that's fine. But without fundamentally changing what swimming is. And so again, that's an example of a time when I just tried to lean in and say, well, let's figure out how to yes and, right? Not yes but, yes and. And that's kind of the approach that I've tried to take in my career.
Swimming used to be a sport where if you wanted to do it in a long pool,
Mm.
that was a big chasm that you had to cross, and you knew who was great because certain people could cross that chasm. Some people could do it in the short pool, but they couldn't do it in the long pool. But the tech suits took that away. Tech suits, they made you float, and they changed your core. And I'm about innovation, but it sounds like you were trying to find realistic middle ground in a world that keeps advancing. And I like your perspective. I didn't know that you had that position at the time. That's really fascinating.
Well, it was really fun. It was really fun because we would have these committee discussions, and I'd be like, so basically, we're talking about something that's going to take my world record away. So, I do have a say, but also, um, that's what records are made for, right? You and I both know that, right? That's what they're made for, to chase after. And that has more to do with who comes next as to me. That's not on me. Anyway, it was a great moment. It was fun to be involved in that.
You went back to 1972, and that was Title IX in 1972. Was that when it was passed?
Yes.
And it's one of the most transformative things that has ever blessed the world. And we've watched it over generations. The law wasn't enforced. It was being enforced when I was in college in the late 80s and into early 90s. And I can tell you, as a man, witnessing what men said about that enforcement and how they reacted to it was pretty abhorrent. 20 years after the law had passed, and now as we're standing in 2024, I watch women's NCAA the basketball. I watched the NCAA tournament, and I tried to watch the men's, and I couldn't because the women's were so much better. In swimming, I do think that our most exciting stories are coming from the women's side. And part of what I see with the sport of swimming and the greatness of our sport, because that's our experience, is that if you're a woman, when we had to change, you missed it. You and Matt Biondi and Tom Jager were all there in the mix. I was in the room when you were arguing about it. When you said, hey, we should be able to support ourselves, and there should be some sort of an economic environment where we can live and pursue our dreams. You guys fought for that, and then your careers ended. I benefited. I was the first iteration of that generation that benefited. But part of that new environment was, if you're a woman in swimming, you make what a man makes, and you can achieve what a man can achieve. And I've always felt that we should, in the sport of swimming, we should bang the drum and sing that. And I'm kind of disappointed that we haven't.
Important, really important awareness, Mel, and I love that. I love that you said that. And going back to that moment, and part of this is at odds with a little bit at odds with what's in this book and what will certainly be in the next book. But that is, the difference between you should be able to support yourself versus totally change your motivation, right? So there's a difference there, and what you're bringing us back to, which is important historical lesson, is so when I came through, if you were at a certain point in versus a world record or versus some standard, they would help you, right? US Swimming or USOC or somebody would send you a little check, and then you theoretically didn't have to just rely on your athletic scholarship, and you could, support yourself in the summer or stay a year after and not have to get a job. And then the next iteration was, okay, well, we'll get you all jobs that are flexible. So you have to work at Home Depot or for the US Postal Service, and they'll be flexible with your training schedule while you're still working a job. Anyway, that changed from sort of this support model, which was available to many more kids. And then it changed to, well, you win a medal, we'll pay you back. And while that's lovely, that again narrows the focus. And I just feel like if it was part of the supporting the dream, we would have a different, bigger base. And I don't know enough to know about what happens in now, and I know things have changed quite a bit in terms of clubs and places that take on post collegiate athletes and make centers for them and all that. But it was a pivotal moment, and it changed from support to reward. And I think what in those days Matt and I were talking about was support, and then if reward, great, but support for more. And then of course the person that earned it would get something different. And I think what Tom was really interested in was the different, right? Motivated to, I want to be a professional athlete. I want to be like a basketball player. I want to be a professional swimmer. And so all of these things were just the at the very beginnings when I was finishing swimming.
And we're at a unique moment in history where now it's as if it feels like in NCAA leadership, they I feel like they bungled this. I don't know. It's yet to be seen, but I can tell you that everyone within swimming is very nervous about where collegiate swimming is going to be.
Should be.
And
Should be very
because
nervous.
if it's entirely an economic driver behind sports, non-traditional sports like swimming could they could be cut. They could go by the wayside. We don't know. So we're in a very unusual period in history right now. And it feels like we've lost our way. But I'm not
I
in your
couldn't.
world.
No, well, a couple things there, but I think the challenge has been that the NCAA as a membership organization, right? It's a membership organization, it's a non-governmental organization. A lot of people think the NCAA is the same as the federal government, and it's not true. It's not true. That it's the litigious environment that we are in that has brought us to this moment, right? It is a few parents and a few kids in a few sports who reached out and said, I want mine. And that is what has set us on this path. And that's why I try to balance this conversation very, very, very gently, because of course, I mean, who to say no? Yet all of the unintended consequences of our litigious environment, and so in some ways, I'm not defending past leadership of the NCAA, but in some ways, right, it's responsive and reactive instead of getting out ahead. And that I think we could have done better. I think we should have and could have done better. And it held off for a long, long time, not modernizing. And there's certainly nothing transformative about what's been done, even though that's the word that keeps being used. But Mel, we should be, as a swimming community, we should be very nervous about some of the possible solutions that are coming. Very, very nervous. And again, and this will be, you'll see a little bit of this in More Than Medals, but this is what the whole second book will be about this time next year, which is an essay book about what's wrong, what can we actually still do about it, what should we let go of, but what shouldn't we let go of? And what for me it will always be is we all get the same thing out of it. And so by continuing to specialize the top of the heap, we're going to deny a lot of benefits to a lot of kids, right? The majority of kids in college sports, believe in the educational access model, are getting a lot out of the educational access model that is the athletic scholarship. And we're just going to pivot away from that, which is why I stood on the floor of the NCAA 4 years ago and said, please go, please go, please go, take football and please go. And let us, because don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. The model is not broken. A few things need to change. And, that's just what I will continue to say until I'm done talking.
Yes, and
Yes, and.
that's the yes and chapter, not the and don't do yes but.
That's right.
Okay, yeah. Well, I'm looking forward to that book. And in terms of More Than Medals, it's who do you hope to reach?
Yeah, thank you for that. I really hope to reach sports parents, sports parents with young kids. I want them to see the Jim and Diane Mitchell way. I do. Through the years, people have asked me what my special sauce is. Well, why you? Why are you so special? Why were you able to maximize this potential, that you were going to? And the answer is easy. It's my parents, and so for coaches, right? For youth coaches, and even for high school and college coaches of any sport. It's not a swimming book, Mel. It's a sports book. It's a sports parenting book. There's just enough inspiration and threads that I think people will find unique. Well, she couldn't have possibly not swum at all the summer she turned 14 and been in the Olympics 4 years later. Well, that's true. My parents wanted to go on vacation and I wanted to go to summer camp, and I did not swim that summer. Right? There's some things like that people need to get wrapped around their heads about over specialization, over commercialization, but it's a youth sport parenting book. And, there are some threads about this conversation that you and I have had that are in there. It should be fairly inspirational to any young swimmer or any young athlete. Those are the audiences,
All this experience, you put your bullhorn up to your mouth, or whatever metaphor you want to use. It's you're like, I'm gonna step up and share my wisdom. And this is such an unusual point in history. There's something I'm going to share with you. I don't know if I have in our private conversations. Currently now, there's this entire private equity market that's been developing over the years. And not hundreds of millions, but billions of dollars is being invested in youth sports by private equity. And they're looking for a profit margin. And they have focused on youth sports, and swimming is a part of that. And so much so that they're even that big club teams are being approached to sell out to private equity. To me, that sounds very frightening, because they could be hollowed out and just left as dry husks. Some teams are being approached, and it's a profit motivation. It's no one cares about the development or education. They might run the team as a courtesy, but eventually they could cut the team and just keep this learn to swim program. So this is an unusual moment, and I wonder if we all feel that. It's not just the NCAA; it's coming at us from all directions.
it is.
And yeah, it's like, how do you navigate this when you're a parent? So I think that the timing of this is ideal.
Well, thank you so much. You're much more erudite than I in that description. But here's the historic breadcrumb trail-ish, right? I don't have a PhD. I just am an OLY who's paying attention. But Title IX, okay, then more kids in sports, because we doubled, right? Theoretically, we let girls do it too. Okay, so we doubled that. So now, we have to let them go to college. Okay. So now I can actually, as a man, have a job coaching women. Okay. So now we've doubled the number of people who can make their living coaching, right? Get a little college coaching job. So instead of women coaching women, we now have men coaching women. It's not on the surface of it, that's not a bad thing, right? But depends on what conversation you want to have. But as soon as that started, so now we're in the early 80s, and now we've got a boom economy. A lot of money in sports, and they went in at the high end, right? But the real tragedy is not at the high end. The real tragedy is exactly where you brought us to, which is, $1,000 a month to be a member of a travel team, pick your sport. Put that money in a 529, and you don't have to pressure your kid about whether they're going to swim in college or not. You don't have to pressure your kid about whether they stay on a team they don't want to. You don't have to pressure your kid about staying with a coach that they think something's wrong with. Now you got the 80s, 90s, and zeros, okay? And all this pressure is going on. But these families have bought hook, line, and sinker the commercial model rather than the recreational, fun, play, amateur model, where you can only do the character development. And now you're just paying somebody a salary of $100,000 to mistreat your kid. I mean, what is that? So you asked what the audience is, and this is inherent. This is implicit to this book, and will be explicit in the next book. But Jim and Diane Mitchell could not have told you a swim time, could not have told you what events I swam. Jim Mitchell, drove me to practice. I had to get him up. Diane Mitchell worked the bullpen or the concession stand. It was not their thing. They were not over-invested in it. It was allowed to be mine. And that's the power. That's the secret sauce. And we're a long way from that. We're a long way from that.
Yeah, a lot of parents will say, "What did your parents do?" And and you find this consistency. It's not everyone, but you find it, and it's I knew no matter what happened, I could have collapsed on the block, walked away, given up. It didn't matter. I always knew that my parents loved me.
Exactly.
That's it. That's the secret sauce.
That's the only secret sauce. And the good thing is that's actually a controllable. That's not a variable. It can be a controllable, but people have to choose it. People have to choose it.
I love that. This is would you call it a love letter to mom and dad?
In some of the materials absolutely called it a love letter to amateur sports. And it is actually an homage to sport parenting.
I love that.
100%.
Well, I feel like we've covered more than
Quite a
medals.
bit, Mel.
I think we have. And the question is, we need to remind people of this. I think you're going to be making a trip to some big events. You'll be there in person. You can get Betsy Mitchell's autograph, and you can buy the book. And in one of those events, Olympic trials.
Olympic trials.
What days?
And
Do you know yet?
I'll be at, what's that?
What days?
Oh, so the last weekend, Friday the 21st and Saturday the 22nd, I'll be at the Aqua Zone. You can get the book in 3 formats right now. It's available, or you can bring it with you, or I'll have a few copies there if you pick it up at the last minute, but I'm happy to sign for anyone. And mostly what I actually want is I want people to begin having these conversations. I want people to wake up and be thinking about how we don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. That's what I really want. It was so powerful to this little Appalachian river rat. I was just the whole thing. And I want that for lots of people. I don't want us to give up on it, but we have to wake up. We have to wake up.
You've been listening to the SwimSwam Podcast. Stay tuned for new episodes every week. You can take SwimSwam Podcast on the go by subscribing on your favorite podcast platform. Look for links in the description below, and be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel for more videos as well.